She was standing 10 feet away when he said the words that ended her marriage. "I'm not married." 3 words. Cameras flashing. A room full of strangers laughing at a joke they didn't know was real. Cynthia Abba didn't scream. She didn't cry. She turned around, walked out of that ballroom in her red dress, and by morning, she was gone. Kim Ho wouldn't understand what he lost until the silence in his own house nearly broke him. Welcome to Afro Meets Seoul Stories. On today's episode, you'd get a dose of unexpected encounters and beautiful beginnings. If this is your first time here, make sure to like, subscribe, click the notification icon to get a reminder when new amazing stories drop, and send the story to friends and family who you think would love to watch it. And also tell me in the comments which city and country you're watching from. I'd really love to know. Now, let's dive back into this amazing story. 12 years ago, Kim Ho had nothing but a bad idea and a girl who believed in it anyway. He was 26, broke, running a shipping startup out of a rented office with a leaking roof, drowning in debt he didn't tell anyone about. Cynthia Abba was 24, a Nigerian architecture student he met at a friend's party in Seoul, and somehow, against every logical reason 2 people from different worlds shouldn't end up together, she stayed. She stayed when his first company failed. She stayed when his second one nearly did. She learned to cook his mother's recipes from a woman who never fully approved of her. She sat beside hospital beds with him during nights his father was dying. She gave up her own dream, a career in architecture, a name she was building for herself so that he could chase his. And he did. He built an empire. Kim Ho Logistics became a name whispered with respect across 3 continents. But there was another name whispered alongside his. One darker, quieter, the kind people didn't say too loudly in public. Because underneath the suits and boardrooms, Kim Ho was something else entirely. He ran things. Real things. The kind of business where loyalty was currency and betrayal had a price paid in blood, not lawsuits. Cynthia knew. She'd known for years. And she stayed anyway because the man underneath all of it, the one who held her at 3 a.m. when nightmares from his old life crept back, that man was still hers. But success does something to people. It rewires what they think they deserve. Somewhere between the private jets and the board dinners and the new circle of polished, image-obsessed elites, Kim Ho started looking at Cynthia differently. Not with the eyes of a man who remembered what she sacrificed. With the eyes of a man comparing her to the women around him, the ones dripping in diamonds, the ones who never had stretch marks from carrying his children, the ones who fit the picture he was building of himself. He started introducing her as a colleague, then a friend of the family. Then, at events that mattered most, he simply stopped introducing her at all. She noticed. Of course she noticed. But love has a cruel way of making you excuse the people you can't imagine losing. The 10th anniversary gala for Kim Ho Logistics was supposed to be different. It was the biggest night of his career. Investors from 4 countries, press cameras lining the entrance, champagne towers taller than the waitstaff carrying them. Cynthia wore red. She'd chosen it carefully, a color that said, "I am still here, I am still yours." She stood by the entrance waiting for him to walk in with her, the way he used to. He didn't come. She found him near the bar instead, laughing with a woman she didn't recognize, tall, elegant, dressed in black, her hand resting a little too comfortably on his arm. Her name was Ji-Yoon Park, a rising investor from one of the firms backing his newest expansion. Cynthia felt something cold settle in her chest, but she smiled anyway, walked over, and slipped her hand into his. Kim Ho stiffened. A journalist appeared out of nowhere, phone raised, smiling that practiced media smile. "Mr. Kim Ho, congratulations on 10 years. Quick question. Is this your wife?" She gestured toward Cynthia. There was a pause that lasted a lifetime. Kim Ho looked at Cynthia, then at Ji-Yoon, then at the cameras. And something in his face shifted, something small and cowardly and permanent. "No," he said. "I'm not married." The words landed like a slap heard across the entire room. Ji-Yoon's eyebrows lifted, delighted. The journalist scribbled something down. And Cynthia Cynthia just stood there, her hand still half raised from where it had been holding his, now hanging in the air like it belonged to no one. Nobody in that ballroom knew her name. Nobody knew she'd built his home, raised his children, buried his father with him. In one sentence, 12 years of her life had been erased in front of the entire world he'd built his name on. She didn't cause a scene. She didn't cry. She simply lowered her hand, turned, and walked toward the exit, her heels clicking against marble in a rhythm that sounded, to anyone listening closely, exactly like a countdown. Kim Ho didn't chase her. Not that night. He told himself she'd cool off. He told himself it was just business, just optics, just a small lie that meant nothing. He had no idea it was the last time he would see her for a very long time. Kim Ho got home that night expecting silence, the kind Cynthia gave him when she was upset but still there, still folding his shirts, still leaving a plate warm on the stove even when she wouldn't look at him. That kind of silence he knew how to wait out. This silence was different. The house was too quiet, too still. He walked through the hallway calling her name, and it echoed back at him off walls that suddenly felt too big. Their bedroom door was open. Her side of the closet was empty. Not messy. Empty, hangers still swinging slightly like she'd only just left. On the dresser, her wedding ring sat next to a folded note. He didn't read it that night. He couldn't. He just stood there holding a small circle of gold that had meant everything an hour ago, and now felt like it weighed more than the whole building. The kids were asleep. She'd left them. Not because she didn't love them. Kim Ho would understand later that this was the hardest part of what she did, but because she needed them somewhere stable while she figured out how to survive what he'd done to her in front of the entire world. He read the note 3 days later, after he'd called her number so many times it stopped ringing, and went straight to a message that said the number was no longer in service. 12 years, Kim Ho. 12 years I built with you, and it took you 3 words to erase all of it. I'm not asking you to explain. I'm not asking you to apologize. I just need you to sit in this house, the one I made a home, and feel what 12 years of silence sounds like. Tell the children I love them. Tell them I'll come back for them once I can breathe again. He sat on the edge of their bed and, for the first time since he was a boy watching his own father bleed out from a rival's bullet, Kim Ho cried. But grief has a strange shape when you're used to controlling everything. It doesn't stay soft for long. It turns into denial. Denial into anger. Anger into the particular arrogance of a powerful man who cannot fathom that someone would actually leave him. He told himself she'd come back in a week. Cynthia always came back. She always forgave him, for the late nights, for the missed birthdays, for the version of himself he became when business demanded blood instead of boardrooms. Surely this wasn't different. A week passed. Then 2. The children started asking questions he had no answers for. His 6-year-old son stopped eating breakfast because Cynthia used to make it a certain way, with a certain song, and Kim Ho didn't know the words. His 9-year-old daughter stopped speaking to him almost entirely, looking at him some mornings with an expression far too knowing for a child her age, like she understood exactly what he'd done, even if no one had explained it to her directly. Meanwhile, the story was spreading. Not the real story, the ballroom version. Jiun Park, delighted by what she believed was an opening, started appearing at his side more often, at dinners, at meetings, always smiling that same practice smile. The tabloids ran headlines calling him Seoul's most eligible bachelor. Nobody printed the truth, that somewhere in the city, a woman who built that empire beside him was sitting in a rented apartment with nothing but a suitcase and a broken heart, refusing to let anyone see her cry. It was Jiun who found out first, not from Kim Ho, but from an old assistant who let it slip during a company function that Mr. Kim had a wife. Had. Past tense in the way people say it when a marriage has quietly died but nobody's signed the papers. Jiun confronted him in his office, arms crossed, voice sharp. You told a room full of investors and press that you weren't married. Was that a lie, or was that the truth before tonight? Kim Ho said nothing for a long moment. Then, quietly, he admitted it. All of it. 12 years. 2 children. A woman who gave up her own dreams so he could chase his. A woman he'd erased in front of the world because he was ashamed of how she looked next to people who never built anything real in their lives.
June didn't yell.
She didn't gloat either. She simply looked at him with something close to disgust and said, "I don't want to be the reason a family fell apart. I definitely don't want to be with a man who could do that to someone who gave him everything." She walked out of his office and out of his life, and for the first time, Kim Ho was completely, utterly alone with what he'd done. That night, he finally understood the full weight of Cynthia's absence. The house didn't run itself. The children didn't just eat and sleep and go to school on autopilot. Every small thing she'd carried silently for 12 years came crashing down on him at once. School forms, doctor's appointments, his own mother's medication schedule that only Cynthia had memorized, the quiet management of his moods that had kept his empire from crumbling more times than he wanted to admit. He sat in his office at 2 a.m., staring at his phone, at a number that no longer worked, and whispered to no one, "I destroyed the only person who ever really knew me." What will happen next, when a man finally realizes what he lost, but the woman he wronged has already started building a life that no longer needs him? Drop a comment telling me what you think Cynthia should do next. Should she ever give him a real chance to explain? And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss where this story goes. 6 months passed before Kim Ho found her. He hired people, quietly, discreetly, men who normally tracked down debts owed to him, not the woman who used to be his wife. It felt wrong using that kind of power for this. But he was desperate, and desperate men stop caring what feels wrong. She was in Accra, Ghana, not Nigeria, somewhere she'd chosen precisely because it wasn't home, wasn't Seoul, wasn't anywhere either of their families would think to look. She'd taken her maiden name back. Cynthia Abba, architect, finally finishing the license she'd shelved 12 years ago for him. She was working under a small firm, sketching building plans late into the night in a modest apartment with peeling paint, and somehow, from the photos his men sent back, she looked more alive than he'd seen her look in years. That broke something in him more than her leaving ever had. He flew to Accra without telling anyone. No bodyguards, no assistants, no entourage, just Kim Ho alone, standing outside a small office building in the evening heat, waiting for a woman who owed him nothing. She came out at almost 8 p.m., exhausted, a rolled blueprint under her arm, and she stopped dead when she saw him. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. The street around them kept moving, vendors packing up, taxis honking, life continuing indifferent to the two people frozen on the sidewalk staring at each other like strangers who used to be everything. "You shouldn't be here," she finally said.
"I know," he said.
"I came anyway." She turned to walk past him. He caught her arm, gently, not the way he'd have grabbed anyone else, but with the careful desperation of a man terrified she might vanish again if he wasn't careful. "Cynthia,
Please.
just 5 minutes." She looked at his hand on her arm, then up at his face, and something in her eyes, not softness, not yet, but exhaustion, made her nod once. They sat at a small roadside cafe. He ordered nothing. He couldn't eat. He just watched her, the woman who used to memorize his coffee order without asking, now a stranger sitting across from him with her arms crossed and her guard fully up. "I'm sorry," he started. "Don't," she said sharp. "Don't start with sorry. Sorry is what you say when you spill a drink. What you did wasn't an accident, Kim Ho. You looked at me, at 12 years, at our children, at everything I gave up for you, and in front of the entire world, you decided I wasn't worth claiming." "I panicked," he said, and even to his own ears it sounded pathetic. Ji-yoon was standing there, the press was watching, and "You were embarrassed," Cynthia said flatly.
Say it.
"You were embarrassed of me." The silence between them confirmed it more than any words could have. She continued, voice steady despite the years of hurt behind it. "Do you know what it felt like, standing there in a dress I chose because I wanted you to be proud of me, hearing you tell a room full of strangers I don't exist? 12 years, Kim Ho. I gave up architecture for you. I gave up my name at events, my seat at your table, my own ambitions, so that you could become the man everyone applauds. And you erased me in one sentence because I didn't fit the picture anymore." "I know," he whispered. I know, and I hate myself for it every single day. The house is empty without you. The kids ask about you constantly. I don't know how to braid our daughter's hair. I don't know the words to the song you sing our son at breakfast. I didn't just lose a wife, Cynthia. I lost the only person who ever made me feel like a whole man instead of an empire with a body attached to it. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't let the tears fall. She'd promised herself she wouldn't, not for him, not again. I'm not coming back, she said quietly. Not as your wife. I can't unhear those words, Kim Ho. I can't unfeel that humiliation. You didn't just hurt me. You showed me exactly who you become under pressure, and I won't spend the rest of my life wondering when it happens again. He nodded slowly, something breaking further inside him, though he'd expected this. Hoped against it, but expected it. But, she continued, our children need both of us. I won't keep them from their father. I'll co-parent with you. I'll build a relationship with you around them, civil, respectful, present. That's what I can offer. That's all I can offer. It wasn't what he wanted, but it was more than he deserved, and some quiet, humbled part of him knew that. Thank you, he said, and meant it more than he'd meant anything in years. As she stood to leave, she paused, looking down at him one last time. For what it's worth, Kim Ho, the man who used to hold me at 3 a.m. when your nightmares came back, the one who built something out of nothing with me beside him, I loved that man completely. I just don't think he's the same man who stood in that ballroom and let the world believe I never existed. She walked away into the Accra night, and Kim Ho sat alone at that small cafe table, finally understanding that some things, once broken, don't return to their original shape no matter how much love or regret you pour into the cracks. What will happen next? Can two people really co-parent with this much unhealed history between them? Or is heartbreak like this something that never truly stays in the past? Tell me in the comments, do you think Cynthia made the right call, or should she have given him a real second chance? And if this story has you hooked, make sure you're subscribed, because the next part is where everything gets even more emotional. Let's keep going. Co-parenting sounded simple in theory. In practice, it meant Kim Ho flying to Accra every other weekend, sitting in Cynthia's small living room surrounded by moving boxes, watching his children run to a mother who'd built them a new life without him in it. At first, it was unbearable. He'd sit stiffly on her second-hand couch while she moved through the apartment with an ease he'd never seen in Seoul, barefoot, hair wrapped in a scarf, laughing freely with their daughter over something on her phone. This was a version of Cynthia he didn't recognize. Not because she'd changed so much, but because he was finally seeing the woman underneath everything she'd suppressed to keep his world running smoothly. It humbled him in ways nothing else had. Their son, now 7, still asked why Mommy and Daddy didn't live together anymore. Cynthia always answered honestly, in language soft enough for a child to hold. Sometimes grown-ups love each other, but they hurt each other too badly to stay together. That doesn't mean the love for you ever changes. Kim Ho would watch her say this, watch his son nod like it made perfect sense, and feel a fresh wave of shame at how easily she carried what he'd broken. Their daughter, 11 now, was harder to reach. She remembered the gala more than her brother did, old enough to have understood, in fragments, what her father did to her mother that night. She was polite to him, distant. She answered his questions in short sentences and found reasons to leave the room when it was just the two of them. One evening, after months of this careful, aching routine, Kim Ho found her sitting alone on the small balcony of Cynthia's apartment, staring out at the Accra skyline.
Can I sit? He asked.
She shrugged, which he took as permission. They sat in silence for a while before she finally spoke. Why did you say it? He didn't pretend not to understand. I was a coward, he said. I was standing in a room full of people I wanted to impress, and for one terrible second, I cared more about how I looked than about the truth. That I was married to your mother. That you and your brother existed. I've hated myself for it every day since. Mom gave up everything for you, his daughter said, voice tight. She told me not to make me hate you. She never does that, but I asked her once why she stopped being an architect, and she told me the truth. She chose you over her dream. And you couldn't even say her name in front of some reporters. Kim Ho had no defense. He didn't try to build one. "You're right," he said simply. "There's no excuse good enough. All I can do now is show you, both of you, every single day, that I understand what I lost and what I'm trying to become instead." His daughter looked at him for a long moment, something in her face softening just slightly, not forgiveness, but the beginning of a door left open a crack. "Just don't say things you don't mean," she said. "I'd rather you disappear completely than keep hurting us with promises." "I won't," he said. And for the first time in a year, he meant a promise all the way down to his bones. Just as things began to find a fragile, careful rhythm, Ji-yoon Park resurfaced, not out of love, but ambition. She'd moved on to another firm, but the merger she now represented put her directly across the negotiating table from Kim Ho's company months later. Professional, cold, necessary. But old habits and old attractions don't always respect boundaries, and one evening after a long negotiation session, she lingered in his office doorway. "You look different," she said. "Lighter, somehow. Even with everything." "I'm trying to become someone worth being around," he said honestly. "For my kids. For myself." "And Cynthia?" Ji-yoon asked carefully. "She deserves someone who never has to try that hard to do the right thing," he said. "I'm working on becoming him. I don't know if I'll ever be him for her, but I owe it to my children to become him for them." Ji-yoon studied him for a long moment, then nodded, something like respect crossing her face. "For what it's worth," she said, "I hope you get there." She left, and this time, there was no lingering ambiguity, no temptation pulling at either of them. Just two people who'd once nearly caused irreversible damage, now walking separate paths with clearer eyes. Meanwhile, in Accra, Cynthia's firm was preparing to unveil her first major solo project, a community housing development she designed from the ground up, blending Ghanaian architectural tradition with the modern efficiency she'd studied years ago before she shelved her dreams for a man in Seoul. The unveiling would be covered by regional press. Her name, finally front and center, exactly where it should have been 12 years earlier. Kim Ho found out about it through their daughter, who mentioned it casually over dinner, glowing with pride for her mother. He said nothing about it to Cynthia. He simply booked a flight, quietly, the way she once might have shown up for him without being asked, and told no one where he was going. He wasn't going as her husband. He knew that chapter was closed, sealed the moment he uttered 3 careless words in a ballroom that would haunt him forever. He was going as something smaller, humbler, a man who wanted, for once, to stand in the crowd and clap for her the way she'd clapped for him for over a decade, expecting nothing in return. What he didn't expect was what would happen when she saw him standing there. The unveiling was held in a community hall on the edge of Accra, sunlight pouring through open windows. Local officials and reporters gathered around a model of the housing project Cynthia had spent a year building from nothing but sketches and stubborn belief in herself. She stood at the front, poised in a deep green dress, her voice steady as she explained her vision: affordable, dignified housing designed with the same care she'd once poured into a home in Seoul that no longer belonged to her. The crowd listened, genuinely moved, applauding at moments she clearly hadn't expected them to. Kim Ho stood near the back, half hidden behind a pillar, watching a woman finally standing exactly where she was always meant to stand. She saw him near the end, during the applause, over the shoulder of a journalist asking her final questions. Their eyes met across the room. He didn't wave. He didn't approach. He simply held up both hands and clapped, slow and deliberate, making sure she saw it, making sure she understood. No cameras, no ballroom performance this time, just a man finally, quietly proud of her in the way she deserved all along. After the event wound down, she found him outside, leaning against a wall in the fading evening light. "You didn't have to come," she said. "I wanted to," he said. "You built something incredible. I wanted to see it. I wanted to see you." She studied him for a moment, arms crossed, though the hostility that once lived in that posture had softened into something closer to tired peace. "Our daughter told me you've changed. Really changed. Not just saying the right things." "I'm trying," he said. "Every day. Not for you to come back. I stopped hoping for that a long time ago. Just because I owe it to our kids, and honestly, I owe it to the man I used to be before I let all that money and power convince me I was better than the people who actually loved me. Cynthia was quiet for a moment, watching the last of the sun disappear behind the hall. I'm proud of who you're becoming, she said finally. I mean that. It doesn't undo what happened. It never will. But it matters. For them, and honestly, for you too. That's enough, Kim Ho said softly. That's more than enough. They stood there a while longer, not as husband and wife, not as the couple who once built an empire together, but as two people who'd survived something that shattered them and found, on opposite sides of that wreckage, versions of themselves worth respecting again. Months turned into a new rhythm. Kim Ho opened a small satellite office in Accra, not to control her life, not to win her back, but so his children wouldn't have to fly across the world every time they wanted both parents in the same city. He learned the song for his son's breakfast. He learned to braid, clumsily, his daughter's hair on the morning Cynthia had early meetings. He never brought another woman near his children until he was certain, truly certain, he'd become someone worth introducing. Cynthia never remarried him. She never gave him the fairy tale reunion some hopeless part of him still quietly wished for on his hardest nights. But she gave him something else, a front-row seat to watching his children grow up loved by both parents, and the rare, humbling privilege of becoming a better man not to win her back, but because it was simply the right thing to do. Sometimes, the people we hurt the most don't come back to us. Sometimes love doesn't get a second act, only the responsibility to become someone who never repeats the same mistake again. Cynthia rebuilt a life that never needed him to be whole. Kim Ho rebuilt a version of himself that finally understood what he'd almost let slip away completely. So tell me, do you think real change like this is even possible for someone who publicly humiliated the person who gave him everything? Should Cynthia have opened the door to something more between them, or was co-parenting the right and only boundary to hold? And if you were in her shoes standing in that ballroom, what would you have done in that very moment? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. And don't forget to share this with someone who needs a reminder that walking away from what hurts you isn't weakness. It's the beginning of becoming whole again. Thank you for watching Afro Meets Soul Stories. I'll see you in the next one.